Do I have any Buddhists in the crowd? Buddhists? Namaste? Yeah. Me neither. I'm also not Buddhist. But I'm of the Eastern religion. I like Eastern religions quite a bit. So this one was fun for me to put together and get going for you guys. Morning. The dog is by far the most Buddhist one in the room.
It's quite true.
Yeah. Well, welcome you guys. Thanks so much for being here this afternoon. I'm Connor. I think I know you guys, so I won't belabor the issue too much. But today we're talking about Buddhism. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys about Buddhism. I practice Hinduism myself, and they're very adjacent. And I really like Eastern religions, and I think that they're important right now. So these are Buddhist monks, and I know you guys have typically seen the Buddhist monks, and they look like this, and they're dressed in orange, and we'll talk all about why they are sitting here, but they're typically sitting in pretty intense meditation. I mean, if you see Buddhist monks, they are not doing a lot, and there's a good reason for it. Buddhism is the 5th largest religion in the world. There are about 500 million people who practice Buddhism worldwide. That is behind Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and the agnostic folks. So Buddhism is one of the major 5, certainly, if we're including also the non-believers. And, you know, it dates back to about 500 BC, and it's concentrated primarily in the southeast of Asia. Buddhism's kind of proliferation and its concentration is very, very dense in Southeast Asia. There are about 1 to 2 million Buddhists in the United States. Some of them are great practitioners, others are very liberal practitioners. And that's true of just Buddhism as a whole. There's a lot of these countries that are Buddhist in name, but not very adamant practitioners. It's much like any other religion in the world. You have some people who are very into it, and then you have some people who practice it as a way to enrich their lives. But it's the national religion of many of these smaller Southeast Asian countries. So I know that we talked about Thailand a couple weeks ago. And Thailand is a primarily Buddhist country. It is 98% Buddhist. So Thailand, Bhutan, Malaysia, many of these countries are very Buddhist and kind of claim it as the national religion. So we're going to go back in time, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about the life of the Buddha to give you guys a better understanding of what Buddhism is all about. I've always thought that Buddhism is a little like, what do they believe in? Do they believe in God? Do they believe in an afterlife? What is this all about? So I hope to give you guys a pretty good overview of the religion as a whole and just the practice of being Buddhist. It's very liberal in the sense of being a religion. So to do that, we have to go back to the birthplace of the Buddha. And the Buddha was born here in Nepal, in Lumbini. And Lumbini is kind of in central Nepal. It's almost a little bit, it's close to the border with northern India. And Buddha spent much of his life in India after moving out of Nepal. But Nepal is very proud of being the home place of the Buddha. I often see this bumper sticker around town, and I kind of know that I have a Nepali in front of me because it says like birthplace of the Buddha, and they are very proud of they have bumper stickers for it and everything. So he was born in a Himalayan region, more or less, and he was born as a prince. His parents were very wealthy, and they were kind of kings and queens of this region. The Nepal and India don't necessarily exist as they do today during this time. So the borders are a little more amorphous, and these are run by families. They're run by kingdoms. And Buddha is born into this kingdom. He is born a prince, and his name is Siddhartha Gautama. So Siddhartha Gautama is the founder of the Buddhist religion as we understand it and know it. But when he was being born in about 538 BC, his parents, while they were pregnant with him, went to a fortune teller. And the fortune teller told them that their son would either be a great king and a great ruler and very opulent, very wealthy, and very powerful, or he will be a great spiritual leader. And so they kind of said, your son is going to be great either way, but he could take one of two paths, and we don't know which one he is going to take. So his parents, hearing that news, tried to make a very insular environment for Siddhartha Gautama. They did not want him to experience any sort of suffering because they wanted him to follow the path of power. They wanted him to be invested in worldly things, and they wanted to accrue a bunch of wealth, and they wanted him to follow in their footsteps. So Buddha, or Siddhartha, lived a relatively sheltered life, very much on the palace grounds and in very wealthy, opulent places. Up until the point that he was about 29 years old, he was insulated from the suffering in the experience of the world. And this was very deliberate on his parents' part because they did not want him to be that great spiritual leader in the end. But try as they might, they ultimately failed at that one. So very famously, Siddhartha goes out and he decides that he wants to have this experience, that he has this moment of self-recognition where he says, I have no idea what life is like for the common man. I have never seen life for the common man. I have had this guarded, spoiled life. What is life like for the common man? And so Buddha goes out on 4 different little expeditions into town. And on each of these expeditions, he has what we now call one of his 4 sights. And his 4 sights are, he goes out and he sees a very sick man laying in a bed, and he sees the man suffering and dying. Here he sees an old beggar walking along the street, very decrepit and very malformed. Here he walks across a funeral procession and he sees death. And on the 4th vision, he comes across an ascetic. He comes across a Hindu saint who is meditating under a tree and is extremely blissful and very excited and very, very pleasant. So these were Buddha's first encounters with suffering, more or less. And Buddha realized in those moments that suffering was inherent in life, that we all get sick, we all find ourselves in times of troubles, and we all die. And he started to contemplate some of the bigger questions in life, which is just how can I basically transcend this suffering? The suffering is so painful. My heart is so big when I see somebody dying or I see somebody aging or sick. I have such a hard time, and it's hurting me as well. So when he comes across the monk sitting under the tree, he's found in this monk a man who has transcended the suffering of life. And in that moment, he sort of decides that that is going to be the life that he will pursue going forward. And this is the big moment for Siddhartha, is that he has decided that he is going to make his life about the spiritual journey and about finding this realization, about finding enlightenment. So Siddhartha renounces all of his things very famously. And he renounces his position and he says, I don't want to be a prince anymore. I want to be an enlightened master. And so he starts to study in a couple different traditions and with a couple different schools to try and find his own version of enlightenment, to try to find freedom from suffering. And he gets in with a couple very, very adamant Vedic practitioners. They are some of the most intense Vedic practitioners in the world at the time. And the Vedic practice at this time was very much about renunciation. The Hindu religion very much understood that worldly pleasures and worldly pursuits were not the meaning of life. And that in order to transcend worldly pleasures and worldly pursuits and the suffering that comes with those, that he would have to basically, that the Vedic practitioners felt that they had to reject those things. That you couldn't eat good foods, you couldn't have pleasure, you had to be entirely celibate, you had to renounce worldly things in order to discover the divine within you. It's a very, very intense practice, and it's a very hard-line school of thought. And so many Vedic practitioners during this time were sitting in deep meditation, eating very little, trying to attain this enlightenment, trying to attain this transcendence in some way, shape, or form. Buddha himself practiced this. They say that the Buddha was living off of a grain of rice a day during this time, and that he was emaciated. He looked like this, that you could pinch his stomach and you could touch his spine. He was so skinny, and he was so renunciate in many ways. But he kind of realized that he wasn't getting a lot out of this practice. He was experiencing very intense visions and very intense things in his meditations, but he found that even with those moments of great ecstasy and moments of great pleasure, he always had to come down, and he always had to come back into his humanity, and he would always come into suffering when he returned to his humanity. So this was very difficult for him, and he said, I'm experiencing these wonderful things meditating, but I still come back and suffer. How do I transcend suffering entirely? How can I not suffer any longer? And how can I stop suffering for the rest of the world? So he renounces his practice, Buddha. He renounces the Vedic practice, and he leaves those 5 guys behind. And it's a whole dramatic scene where they think he's gone back to the world and that he'll never accomplish anything, and he's a failure on the spiritual path. But Siddhartha Gautama does not see himself that way, and Siddhartha Gautama is still dead set on full transcendence of suffering. So he sits here. This is the Mahabodhi temple. It's since been commemorated, but here is this massive Bodhi tree. Bodhis are like small figs, and they produce seeds. These are Bodhi seeds on my mala. And many Buddhist practitioners use these seeds to pray, and they use these to count their mantras. So they're very powerful trees spiritually. And in large part because the Buddha sat at the foot of this tree for about 5 years. And he sat at the foot of this tree for 5 years, and he made a declaration that he would not move from that spot until he had reached the end of suffering, more or less. And on that day, Buddha embarks on the most intense meditation journey that anybody in the world has ever had. And Buddha, again, starts to experience many different spiritual attainments as he's meditating. But with every single attainment, the Buddha pretty quickly recognizes that he still has to come back and he still has to experience suffering. He will not stop at anything less than no suffering whatsoever. How do I transcend that suffering, and how do I teach others to transcend that suffering? So the Buddha continues to sit, and he sits through these visions of God, and he sits through visions of demons, and he sits through these very intense visions that he's having because he understands that those are ultimately not going to free him from suffering. They are just other good things in the world, right? Even if you have the vision of Mother Mary, that does not fix the suffering that you have in your life. It's a very intense experience, but it does not end your suffering, right? And the Buddha understood this and was dead set on this. It is said that kind of the last stage of this meditation, he was sitting in deep meditation, and the demon of pleasure came to him. The demon, the king of pleasure, came to him, and he said, I will give you everything. I will give you all the money you want in the world. I will give you all the power in the world. I will give you anything you want. You name it, you can have it. And the Buddha said, no, I don't want any of those things. I'm renouncing all. I don't want anything to do with those things. The king of pleasure then offered his 3 daughters and said, you can marry one or all of these 3 daughters. I will give you anything to stop this pursuit that you are on. And he said, no, I don't want any of that. And the king of pleasure notoriously was adamant and was not giving up this pursuit. And the Buddha, sitting in meditation, hasn't moved in about 5 years, very famously put his right hand on the earth. And in that moment, the earth shook, and the king of pleasure faded away. And in that moment, Buddha attained enlightenment. And in that moment, he saw the clear light of the void, and he realized the end of the suffering. And in that moment, he was free from all suffering. And it was something that he could take back into the world. And this is the moment that Siddhartha Gautama goes from being Siddhartha Gautama to being the Buddha. Buddha just means the awakened one. And so that's what he said. He came down from that mountain and he was glowing. And he ran into some of the old priests from his former life and some of the passersby. And they said, who are you? Are you a saint? And he said, no. And they said, are you a god? And he said, no. And they said, are you an angel? And he said, no. And they said, well, what are you? And he said, well, I'm awake. I'm the Buddha. I'm the awakened one. And from that moment, he starts to teach. And he starts to bring these teachings and what he learned in his deep meditation to other spiritual seekers. His first lectures, Buddha would spend the rest of his life giving teachings to anybody who would listen to him. And his whole pursuit was about getting others free from suffering as well. So he descended and he went to Sarnath. And Sarnath is the place that he's going to give his first lectures. It's one of the more famous pilgrimages that you can take. Every religion sort of has their pilgrimage sites. We have Jerusalem, we have Mecca and Medina. These are pilgrimage sites for major Buddhists, and Sarnath is just one of those, but as is the Mahabodhi temple here in India as well. So he descends to Sarnath and he starts to give these teachings. And the first people he teaches are actually those 5 guys that he was practicing with, those Vedic practitioners, because he's come down and they can see that something in him has changed. And it is the thing that they have always been seeking. They've always wanted that transcendence, and they want to understand how he got it. I mean, they're very skeptical at first, but they make their way in. And Buddha comes down, and what he says, and what he discovered in his meditation was what he termed the middle way. The Buddha came back, and as I mentioned, the only way to attain enlightenment up to that point, and especially the Hindu religion, was to be a full renunciate, was to be a total ascetic, was to eat as little as possible, have no pleasure in your life, just focus entirely on God. And Buddha said, no, that is not the way to lasting enlightenment. The way to lasting enlightenment is the middle way. You can still indulge in those things. You can eat what you want. You can have pleasure. You can have good things in your life. But you need to be able to change your relationship to those things. You need to practice non-attachment. That these things can be part of your life, but they cannot dictate your life. He understood that most of our problems come from us trying to feel good. We are always constantly trying to feel better all the time. And we think that the things in our lives will make us feel better. If I just get the right girlfriend, or if I just get the right job, or these are my examples, right? If I just get all these things in order, then I'll finally be happy. And the Buddha said, no, none of those things can make you happy. The only thing that will make you happy is freedom. And in order to be free, you have to detach from the worldly things. And so Buddha came down with this insight, and he said that everything is impermanent. And this is the foundation of the Buddhist religion, is the understanding that everything that has a beginning also has an end. There is no such thing as lasting anything. Every single person who is born, death is inherent in every birth, right? Every single person who is born will die. Every single animal who is born will die. Every single building ever constructed will come down at some point. There is nothing that you can fall back on. There's nothing that you can rely upon. So we have to start there with the realization that nothing in the world will last forever, despite our best efforts, right? We put so much faith in our partners, and we either break up with that partner or they even pass on at a certain point. They will get sick. They will die. And so I can't always rely on somebody else for my happiness. So what do? I recognize first that that's the truth. And I come to terms with the fact that this is all impermanent. And so this was one of Buddha's first teachings. Buddha also came back, and he had great insights into the world of karma and the wheel of samsara. When we are on the wheel, this is the wheel of samsara, and this is the wheel. Samsara is essentially a term for the realm of suffering. And we are all in samsara, more or less. We have samsara, and then we have nirvana. And nirvana is what Buddha had attained. And that was the freedom from suffering. So he had almost transcended the world. In the wheel of samsara, which we are all on, we are all constantly subject to conditions, right? I got the job. I lost the job. I got the girlfriend. I lost the girlfriend. We broke up. Whatever it is. All of these things are an up and a down in our lives, right? So how do we get off the wheel? Getting off the wheel is about breaking with our attachment to those things. It's about saying that those things are not the things that are going to make me happy. And I'm going to stop relying on those things to make me happy. It doesn't mean I'm not going to have those things. I can have partners. I can have good jobs. I can have wealth. But I have to understand that that is a temporary condition in my life. That I will not always be wealthy. That my person won't always be here, right? And so I don't take refuge in those things. That's a big concept in Buddhism. It's taking refuge in those things. So what do I take refuge in? Is a big question. Buddha also came back with insights into karma. And karma is the belief that every single action, every single thought, every single move we do has an equal and opposite reaction in the world. This is very foundational to Newton as a whole, right? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. If I do bad things to others, bad things will happen to me. If I do good things to others, good things will happen to me. We can sometimes see some of these things. If you are mean to somebody and they are mean back, that is a very transparent exchange of karma. But some of these things are a little bit more metaphysical. And some of these things where if I, steal a candy bar on my way out of the store, I may experience somebody stealing from me something small later in life. And the Buddha said that that was entirely true. And until we had exhausted our karma, that we would always be on the wheel of samsara. The wheel of samsara transcends lifetimes as well. So this is the big Buddhist belief in reincarnation. That so long as I have unspent karma, unspent energy in a lifetime, that energy will carry into the next lifetime, right? So if I steal something from a store today, that might not come back to me in this lifetime. It may just come back to me in the next lifetime, but it will always, always, always come back. So the way to get off the wheel of samsara is to transcend it. It is to find a way out, and it is to stop producing karma. There's a big misnomer when we talk about some of these Eastern religions that good karma is better than bad karma. And that is kind of true in some senses, but it's also not entirely true. Because good karma is still karma. I still have to live that out. Buddha wanted to be done with it all. He wanted to be off the face of the planet, just totally free. We all have, I have this experience. But he said that we have to be done with karma. Well, this is why the Buddhists sit in such intense meditation. When you are sitting in meditation, not thinking about anything, you certainly transcend. You move forward spiritually, but you're also not creating any karma whatsoever. When you are sat still, thinking nothing, there is no karma being made, and there's no karma that you have to endure later on from the actions that you're taking now. We are all producing karma with every single step that we take, every single action that we do. So the best thing is to sit in meditation. And if you are very serious about it, that is exactly what you do in the Buddhist religion. The Buddha came down with the foundation of the Buddhist religion, which is the Four Noble Truths. This is the foundation of the belief system. And he said there are 4 truths, right? Most things are not true, but there are 4 things that you can rely upon. 1 is the truth of suffering. That suffering happens. Suffering is inherent in all existence. We all get sick, we all die, we all struggle. In some way, shape, or form in our lives, we will all experience suffering. And that suffering is inevitable. There is nothing I can do. There's no careful planning I can do to prevent myself from suffering. We all have this notion that if I just do everything right and I make the right calls and I have the right people there, that nothing bad could ever happen to me. That is totally fallacious. We have so many uncontrolled variables in our lives, whether it's just driving, right? When I'm on the road, there are thousands of people also on the road with me, right? I can't control what they do. I can't control if I get in an accident, no matter how carefully I drive all the time. So I have to understand that suffering will happen. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. The second is the truth of the cause of the suffering. Buddha believed that most of our suffering, I'll tell you one other thing. Buddha often told the parable of 2 arrows. And Buddha said, in the truth of suffering, bad things will happen. Things that you do not want to happen are going to happen to you, right? You will get rear-ended by having done nothing wrong. You will find yourself sick, despite the fact that you put hand sanitizer on all the time and wore a mask and did everything. You'll still get sick. And so he said that those things will happen. But there's another form of suffering that we all experience, which is our thoughts and what we think about those situations. And our self-pity and our despair around those situations. I can't believe I got sick. I did everything right. I think this is total BS that I'm sick right now. And we're fighting what's really happening. I really didn't want my friend to have that accident. I'm so sad that they're hurt, right? I'm fighting the reality of what's happening. And that's a lot of my feelings. I'm working through what's happening. But I suffer most at the hands of my mind. The event happens, and then I suffer for a month after the event happens. because of my mind and my thoughts and the self-pity I go into it. If that shouldn't happen to me. I can't believe that happened to me. Why would this happen to me? So that's the second arrow. And the Buddha said that the second arrow was always avoidable. If you get hit by the first arrow, it is totally avoidable. If you get hit by the second arrow, it is your fault. It is your responsibility to take care of the thoughts that go into it. He said the truth of the cause of suffering was craving and aversion. We move towards things we like, and we move away from things that we don't. We say, I like this shirt, I want more of it. I have a shirt, I have a shirt-sized hole in my heart, and now I really want that shirt. I don't like those pants, I don't want them, I hope I never see them again. And I'm constantly bouncing back and forth between my preferences of things I like and things I don't like. This happens with us. For most of us, most of our thinking is lumped into three piles. We see something, we have an interaction, and we go, I liked that, I didn't like that, or I'm pretty indifferent about that. And we live in these three buckets. Our minds make us think that it is far more complicated than this, and that there's far more nuance to it. But in reality, if you sit with your thoughts, and you are mindful of your thoughts, you will find that they always go into this bucket. I like this lecture. I'm really enjoying this. I hope he keeps going. I hate this lecture. I really hope he stops soon, right? Or I'm about to take a nap, and it's nice to be here, right? So we always are doing this, and as long as we are doing that, we are going to be suffering, right? They're serving spaghetti at dinner, and I really wanted tacos, right? I'm constantly in a state of conflict with what is actually happening in the world. And as long as I'm in that state of conflict, that judgment about the world and its people, I will never be happy. It's not about those things. It's not about if I'm right or wrong. It's about my suffering. Am I suffering? I can be entirely right about so many situations, and I suffer immensely. I wish we were not at war with Iran right now, but I can't control anything about that. But I can control my reaction to those things. So craving and aversion are the causes of suffering. The truth of the end of suffering. The Buddha came down and he said, I have the path. I know how to escape suffering. And then the last part is the path leading to the end of suffering. And Buddha put forth the path as part of his enlightenment. The path is typically referred to as the Eightfold Path. And all Buddhist practices are generally geared towards cultivating one of these aspects of life. And if you can perfect these aspects of self, you will transcend suffering forever. You will be enlightened, and you don't have to suffer again. So these things are the right view, right? That everything is impermanent. That there will never be something that I can totally rely on until the day I die. Right intention, having good intentions in your heart, having an open heart. Right speech, making sure that I'm not disparaging others, right? I create karma when I talk poorly about others, and when I say negative things about situations in my life, that percolates back into me, right? If I'm judging these things outside of me, it may feel good to say, but ultimately it's going to leave me feeling worse later on. Right action, making sure that I'm noble in my actions, and making sure that I'm not doing more than I have to, or creating extra additional karma that I don't need to be. Right livelihood. There are some precepts that the Buddha set out, much like the Ten Commandments. We'll talk about them on the next slide, but practicing those would be right livelihood. Right effort. Where am I putting my attention? What am I working on? Am I working towards the end of suffering, or am I working towards the contribution of suffering? I go through this all the time with my other job. It's just like, I'm working in UX research, developing AI that's going to put me out of a job. Like, it's not the right effort, right? And I can weigh these things in my life as I'm thinking about them spiritually. Right concentration and right mindfulness. These are the two aspects that are mostly cultivated through deep meditation. I need to cultivate a relationship with my mind. Most of us are on top of our minds. We are not cognizant of the thoughts that we are having. We are acting on the thoughts we are having because we believe what is going on in our minds is who we actually are. But what you realize when you sit in meditation is that thoughts come and thoughts go. You don't have thoughts. Thoughts come to you. And if you sit in meditation for 5 minutes, you trying not to think, you will realize that you're thinking all the time. It's not something, you're not having thoughts. You're not inspiring yourself to have these thoughts. These thoughts are coming. And understanding that your thoughts just come and they also go is a powerful, powerful tool in your own personal development, because you don't have to act on all those thoughts, and they don't have to be a part of you, right? I can have negative thoughts about others, but if I do nothing with them and I sit with them and I release it, it's all gone. And so that's the idea, is that there's personal development in meditation, and there's a relationship that I can create with my mind. I can sense when I'm craving or when I'm averse to something, and I can I can decide to act a little bit differently. So that's the Eightfold Path. The last part that he put forth was the 5 precepts. And the 5 precepts are very much like the 10 Commandments. They are rules for living. It is, I observe, refraining from killing any living beings. Buddhists are vegetarian, through and through. They do not kill. I observe, refraining from taking what the owner does not give. I don't steal. I observe, refraining from committing sexual misconduct. I am not, out there. I observe, refraining from telling lies. I don't lie. And then I observe, refraining from taking any intoxicant or drug. I do not take alcohol. I do not take drugs. I do not take anything that affects my thinking, because my thinking is what I am trying to correct. And my thinking is what I'm working on. And those things take me off that path. I cannot control my thinking when I am fully intoxicated. So the Buddha spent his entire life, the next 50 years of his life, basically 45, preaching these things. And he preached them to a number of different disciples, but he preached them to anybody who would come. And he gave of this information very freely, and he healed many people, and he did many miracles. The Buddha has a number of stories of miracles that he performed, including one day when he was sitting in meditation and all different forms of Buddha took over the sky. And you had a reclining Buddha, and you had a laughing Buddha, and you had an ecstatic Buddha, and you see all these in different temples throughout the Buddhist world, as you may see Buddha in different positions. And that all comes from this miracle that he had while he was in ecstatic meditation and projected onto the world. But he never claimed to be God. This is a big point in Buddha's development, was that he said, yes, I did perform that miracle, but you can too. I'm a human before I am anything else. You have access to these things. You just need to follow my prescribed path, and you will do miracles yourself. He did not want this to be exclusionary. He believed that every single person has an internal Buddha nature within them. We all have it. And that all we have to do is access it. So humanity is foremost in Buddha's life. Buddha died in 483 BC. And he died at about the age of 80. Many people believe that one of his disciples gave him a piece of meat. When him not knowing that it was meat, he ate that meat, and in that way he had broken his practice. And that is why he died. He got sick very quickly after that, and he died, surrounded by all of his followers. And in those moments he said that, remember that death is inherent in all things. Work towards your liberation with vigor. That was his final message. And that's the message that the Buddha has given us for the world, is to work on enlightenment with vigor. Work on yourself with vigor. Do not concern yourself with others. All things must pass. Throughout Buddha's life, he gave many of these lectures, and they have provided the foundation for much of the belief going into Buddhism as we know it today. There's no Bible, there's no Quran, there's no holy text, but there are many of his lectures and many of his teachings that were written down years after his death. People started to transcribe some of the lectures that he had given to his followers. And they wrote them on palm leaves for the most part. Most of the first sutras were written on palm leaves. And these represent the canon of Buddhist scripture now. And many people turn to the sutras to look to the Buddha's direct words in his life. And this is what many people practice today. But Buddhism has since expanded to much of the world. One of his mandates was to take this to others. They are far too concerned with the world and its people. We need more people who are looking inwards and turning away from much of the worldliness of the world. And it's spread in a number of different schools. So Buddha was born in and around here. And it has spread mostly to the east from where he was, or to the, east of where he was. And it's made its way into Southeast Asia, and different schools have since made their ways up north into Tibet, China, Mongolia, different parts of the world. And there are 3 primary schools that we talk about when we're talking about Buddhism, and they are very regional. So in the south, we have Theravada Buddhism, and it is the southern Buddhism. In the east is much of the Chinese Buddhism and some of the Japan and Korean Buddhism. This is a lot of Mahayana Buddhism, they call it. And this is the Buddhism that is more common in the United States now. It's a little less technical. The Theravada, for example, is very focused on monkhood. And it's very focused on attaining personal enlightenment. And it's very focused on keeping to yourself, doing your things, and living your life. The Mahayana, in contrast, is far more concerned with the liberation of all beings. It's more concerned with the liberation and suffering of all beings. And so you do a lot more charity and altruistic acts in the Mahayana school because you're bringing these teachings to them. And then Tibetan Buddhism, which is this beautiful, beautiful combination of a lot of ancient practice and ritual with modern day Buddhist thinking. So we're going to talk about those. The Theravada is the second largest school. The Mahayana is the biggest, but the Theravada is the second largest. And as I mentioned, the Theravada is very concerned with practice and with individual liberation. So many people who practice Theravada Buddhism, if they are serious about it, they will become monks at some point in their life. And they will look like this. These are the monks that we see all the time. And these were the monks that were like walking in the Walk for Peace. If you guys saw that in the last couple months, is that they had those 30 monks that walked from Georgia to Washington, D.C. It was beautiful. But the Theravada monks are very adamant about their practice. Here, they are moving through the streets begging. Theravada monks do not buy any of their own food. They do not have any personal wealth. They only take what is given. So if you are in a Theravada part of the world, you will see monks moving from person to person, asking for food, asking for water, asking for anything. They cannot eat anything that is not given to them. And the theory behind this is actually that the Theravada monks contribute a lot to society, and it's their payment. That they bring scripture, they bring lectures, they bring teachings to the people, and the people pay them for it in food and water. And if a Theravada monk is not contributing to their society, to their community, they should get nothing in return. So if you haven't seen this monk teach or anything like that, you may not give him food because he has not given anything to you. And in this way, this cultivates them as active practitioners and as people who are bringing this message to others. One big thing about the Theravada school compared to the Mahayana school is just that the Theravadas are very concerned with individual liberation. That you can achieve enlightenment, and that is the purpose. That you will achieve enlightenment. It's very different than the Mahayana in that respect. The Mahayana Buddhists, and this is the largest school of Buddhism in the world, have a different belief. Instead of cultivating enlightenment and mindfulness and all of these different Buddhist aspects for the sake of themselves, they cultivate it for the sake of all beings. There's a belief in oneness, that the ultimate transcendence and ultimate enlightenment is reintegration into the one in many ways. So if we're taking that school of thought, the Mahayana Buddhists believe that I can't get free. If I am part of the one and I'm free, but you're not, then I'm still not, right? So this is a big question in the Mahayana school. And the Mahayana school believes that nobody will be free until we are all free. So this is a bodhisattva. And the bodhisattvas are basically saints in the Buddhist religion. And they are not Buddhas, but they are very close to Buddhas. They have attained personal enlightenment in the world, and they have started to do great things in this realm or the next. And they reincarnate. The bodhisattva reincarnates time after time after time because of this belief that we are not free until we are all free. The bodhisattva makes a vow to not leave until everyone is free. And so this is the vow that many Mahayana Buddhists will take when they join the religion. Is basically, I will come back and I will help so long as I have to, until every single last living thing even is free. So this is the vow that many Buddhists take. It's called the Great Bodhisattva Vow. It says, beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is insurpassable. I vow to be it. This is very confusing, right? Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. I mean, this is the infinite compassion of the Buddha, and this is the infinite compassion of Buddhists, is that I will always come back for another. No matter how long it takes, no matter how many there are, I will always come back for another. And I understand that it's infinite, but I'm still coming back for more. So there's a lot of paradox in the Buddhist religion, and a lot of the paradox is to guide us to our enlightenment. It's to help us question our own thinking. But the Buddhist schools put forth many of these things. Another school of Buddhism is Tibetan Buddhism. And this is one that we may be familiar with because we all kind of know the Dalai Lama. But Tibetan Buddhism is also referred to as the Vajrayana school. It is a very aggressive spiritual path. The Vajrayana means the quickest way, and it emphasizes very intense practice to reach enlightenment as quickly as possible. And they do very intense, very confusing sorts of practices. I have a great teacher who's an avid practitioner of this, and he teaches me very crazy things. These are Tibetan prayer wheels. If you ever walk through into a Buddhist temple, you may see these wheels outside the temple. Give them a spin and say a prayer. They have mantras on the side, and they're very holy. But the Tibetan school is very prominent because of the role it's kind of played in global politics. The Tibetan school also relies heavily on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is a very interesting book. It's ideally somebody reads it to you as you are moving to the other side. It is about navigating the space between this life and the next, whatever that would be. And it's about choosing in that moment what is going to be the next life. They say that, you have this white light experience when you pass and you start to see the white light. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, if you can recognize yourself as the white light as it's happening, you will find yourself immediately free in that moment. So that's the highest kind of element of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is to see yourself in the white light. When that white light comes, you say, I am that. And in that moment, you will transcend. But if you don't do that, which most of us don't, because most of us have a lot of karma, and most of us will return either to this planet or some other realm, you enter the Bardo state. And the Bardo state is this liminal space between life and the next birth, where you are choosing your next birth. And you are choosing where to incarnate. And there are more favorable lives and there are less favorable lives. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead will guide you to a more favorable life. But the contemplation of death as a whole is extremely important in the Buddhist faith, right? I mean, all things must come to an end. All things have an end. Death is inherent in all things born. You should be contemplating death all the time if you are a practicing Buddhist, because death is the truth. Death is the reality. So they have a very heavy emphasis on this in the Tibetan school, and it's a very, very cool book, actually, and it has a lot of benefit in life if you ever want to read it as well. Another school that we are pretty familiar with here in the West is Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism the Mahayana school started to make its way into China, and it started to make its way into Korea, and it started to make its way into Japan. All of those regions had their own religions at the time, and many of them were practicing Taoists, and many of them were practicing Confucianists, as well as some other schools. So Zen is kind of the child of many of the Eastern religions. It takes aspects from Taoism, it takes aspects from Confucianism, and it takes aspects from Buddhism. And taken all together, you can practice a very aggressive path to enlightenment. Zen is very strange. Zen is all about the paradoxes. If you sit with a Zen master or rishi, they will just start asking you nonsensical questions. It's like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And there is no sound of one hand clapping. And so these questions are designed to break your mind. They're designed to break your concepts so that you can see Buddha in all things. Zen got popular in the United States and is still very popular in the United States, in large part due to this man right here. He was a Soyin Shaku, came to the United States, and he brought a lot of what we now practice as Buddhism in the United States. And a lot of the Buddhism that is around is Zen as a result of this man. There are other schools that have made their way since, but he's probably the biggest figure that brought it to the United States. Very interesting guy. But also, I mean, the Zen Center, the DU Zen Center is like right over here. A very cool place. They have a little Zendo, and it's a great place to meditate if you ever feel compelled. So we're going to talk about some issues today, and we're just going to wrap with that, discussing what's going on in the Buddhist world. What are we talking about here? So in 1935, we found our new Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is an institution in Tibetan Buddhism. And this is the 14th Dalai Lama. There have been 13 other Dalai Lamas before him. The idea being that the Dalai Lama reincarnates to return. He is a bodhisattva himself. And he continuously returns to guide us on our own path of liberation. And the Dalai Lama was enlightened lifetimes and lifetimes ago. But he constantly returns to guide us all to enlightenment. Because until we are all enlightened, he is not free. So the Dalai Lama periodically reincarnates. At every death of a Dalai Lama, the Dalai Lama will say, I'm going to reincarnate in Nepal. I will be in a Himalayan village. You have to come find me. And so when the Dalai Lama dies, they set out a bunch of monks to go on pilgrimages to all of the places that could fit the description of what the Dalai Lama had put out there. And they start to look for young children born during that time. What they do is they will take a bag of toys. And they'll take some of the toys of the Dalai Lama, toys that the Dalai Lama had played with as a child, and they'll mix it in with a bunch of other random toys. And before every child that they see, who people think might be the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama, they lay out all of the toys at their feet, and they see which toys the child picks. And if the child gravitates and picks the toys that the Dalai Lama had played with, then we know we have the next Dalai Lama. And from that point on, he will be exalted. It's got to be a very jarring experience to be a 6-year-old and somebody comes into your small village and takes you off and says, you are the leader of our religion now. But that's what happened with the current Dalai Lama. And they discovered him when he was 6 years old. And the Dalai Lama lived in Tibet as much as here, we're going to go forward real quick. He lived in Tibet, as was. And from about 1910, the independence of Tibet is a long contested issue. They had a brief period of independence from about 1910 to 1950 before the revolution in China. And it was a very brief window, but China came back in force when they wanted to reconquest Tibet and when they wanted to take over Tibet. They took over Tibet for a number of reasons, cultural reasons, a lot of regional purposes, that this is a major border of China, and they absolutely want to control all of their borders. So Tibet is a key strategic partner for China, and when the revolution happened, they swept into Tibet very, very quickly. And this was a big threat to Tibetan independence as well as to Buddhism as an institution, and it very fundamentally changed the Dalai Lama's life. During the Cultural Revolution, and this is the early days of the Cultural Revolution, Mao Zedong and the Chinese were very adamant about getting rid of old institutions. They wanted to have an entirely new China built on entirely new principles, built on entirely new people and entirely new religions. And so Buddhism, at this point in China, was an antiquated institution, and it was very much viewed as such. They came down hard on the Tibetans, and they came down hard on the Buddhists as an institution. This is a bunch of Buddhist monks sitting in front of a crowd being slandered and yelled at and smeared for their practice during the Cultural Revolution. They wanted to be done with Buddhism as was. They wanted to create a new Buddhism in the image of the new Chinese state. And so that is what pushed things forward. That also forced the Dalai Lama to leave for India in 1959, where he has been living in exile ever since. He has not been able to return to China, or he has not been able to return to Tibet, and he very much still claims Tibetan independence. I mean, he's lobbying for a hybrid state where Tibet maintains independence but a Chinese name. There's negotiations that are ongoing about this process, but it was not safe for him to be in China at that time. It was not safe for him to be in Tibet at that time because the Chinese state would have killed him. The Chinese state would have taken him and killed him because he is a leader, and you could not have competing leaders within China during the Cultural Revolution. And all of those institutions had to be squashed. So the Dalai Lama has been in exile ever since and living in India. This conflict is still extremely ongoing. The second highest office in the Tibetan school is what's called the Panchen Lama. The Panchen Lama is basically the Dalai Lama's vice president. He is another reincarnated bodhisattva that has come back to help the Dalai Lama move society forward and move the mission forward. In 1995, the Dalai Lama himself named this young boy as the Panchen Lama. Right after the Dalai Lama claimed that this boy would be the Panchen Lama, the Chinese government came in and kidnapped him and his entire family. We do not know where this boy is today. The Chinese government has, at different intervals, said that the boy is alive and living a happy, healthy life, but we have never seen a picture of him. We have never seen anything. We've never heard anything from his family. They were silenced. They were disappeared in many ways. China, in turn, nominated this man, I forget his name, as the Panchen Lama. And they said, no, it's not the one that the Dalai Lama said. It's the one we said. This is the Chinese-backed Panchen Lama. And they are very adamant about putting this man forth so that people have an alternative to this Tibetan nationalist. And they are trying to root out much of the Tibetan school of thought. This is the Dalai Lama today. He is an incredible guy. Dalai Lama is an amazing, amazing individual. He is infinitely compassionate. Hearing him talk is heartwarming as hearing anybody talk in the world. He is so kind, he is so generous, and he's a wonderful, wonderful spiritual leader. But he's in a bit of a crisis right now. He's in a bit of a, he's at a crossroads here. The Dalai Lama, with the political situation such as it is, does not know if he will reincarnate. This is him at his 90th birthday. He is 90 years old. And the Dalai Lama has said, I do not know if I will reincarnate because the Chinese government would come and take him away and likely kill him very early on, and they would likely subvert the entire movement. So the Dalai Lama is threatening to not reincarnate on the world, which would be a huge change in terms of the Tibetan school of Buddhism. I kind of think that that's the public thing, and that he's telling the tight-knit circle where he'll be and who he'll be, but that he has to be hidden. I don't think the Dalai Lama cannot reincarnate. But this is what he said publicly in order to kind of throw the Chinese government off the scent, at the very least. And that Tibet question still looms large in many ways, and they are still working on negotiating this. But it's not likely that they're going to give it back. Within China, Buddhism still persists, but Buddhism exists in a very strange, impure way. In many ways, during the Cultural Revolution and since, the Chinese state has imposed a lot of their own beliefs onto the institution as a whole. If you control the religion and you control the spirituality, then you control the people. And that's a big directive for the Chinese society, is that they want to be in control of these institutions. During the Cultural Revolution, they shut down every monastery. They went through and systematically burned monasteries to the ground. They killed 900,000 Tibetans in the Cultural Revolution. A lot of that was famine, but it was probably directed at the Tibetans for being Tibetan. And they eviscerated their institutions in order to reconstruct them in a Chinese image, in the ideal form. So Buddhism looks like this in China today, and it's extremely commercialized. It's very weird. I think these are monks performing oblations for a recently deceased member. And in the Buddhist faith, you can do a lot for somebody right after they've died. You can read them the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but there's also a series of rituals and mantras and practices that you can do to help them along their way into the afterlife. You can get that with a bunch of Chinese monks, and you can pay $2,000 for it. And so now they charge for their services and they charge for their rituals. And if you want to become a Buddhist monk in China, you have to go through a Chinese sanctioned school in order to be a sanctioned monk. It's very, very strange, and it's very antithetical to Buddhism as a whole. Buddhism does not care about money. Buddhism does not care about worldly things. So the fact that this institution exists as it is a little defiant to the institution. This is a funny thing. I just learned about this as I was researching this. There is another school of Tibetan Buddhists who believe that the Dalai Lama is not the leader of the Tibetan school, that he is a false leader, and that this guy right here, Dorje Shugden, is the true keeper of humanity. So there's a small school of Tibetans and those in the Tibetan faith who believe that the Dalai Lama is a fake, and that this man right here is the one who actually projects us. And he's not in the world. He's a figure that many enlightened masters have encountered in some of their spiritual journeys and spiritual quests. It's very funny. So because this is a subversive movement to the Dalai Lama, this is an extremely propped up movement by the Chinese government. They throw a lot of money into the advertising campaign for these separatists because it sows discord within the movement as a whole. The Dalai Lama himself says that this man exists, but that he's not benevolent, that he is tricky, and that he may lead you astray, and that you should not follow him. So this is just a little drama in the school now. Last issue that I'm going to talk about, this is the map of Rakhine. And Rakhine State is part of Myanmar right here on the border of Bangladesh. Myanmar is a Buddhist country. It is the national religion of Myanmar is Buddhism, and most people in Myanmar are practicing Buddhists. In the Rakhine State, however, they practice Islam. This is the Rohingya people. They are practitioners of Islam living in Myanmar, and they are facing genocide themselves. There are about 1.3 million people in the Rohingya population, and they are being killed very systematically, and they are being kicked out of their houses very systematically by, for all intents and purposes, a Buddhist government, which is very, very confusing, right? When Buddhists don't kill, Buddhists don't disparage, Buddhists don't steal, and that's what they're doing in this state. Certainly all religions, when they are co-opted by a state, they get very tricky. Religions are not meant to be governmental. Religions are meant to be spiritual. They are meant to be individualized. But when we get on a mass scale, we start to see Buddhists doing bad things in the name of Buddha. So that is just something to be aware of. Buddhists are not perfect. There is no attainment of perfection. Bad things still happen, and it still happens in that world as well. But Buddhism continues to make its way into America. It's become part of our culture. This is in Cresto right here. It's the Dharma Sangha. This one is the Karma Triana Dharma Chakra in New York. Buddhism is growing in the United States. As I mentioned, there's about 1 to 2 million Buddhists. It's always a tense issue. Many people think that we are armchair spiritualists if we practice Buddhism in the United States because it's a more secular religion than most. There's no God that we are worshiping necessarily. So many people gravitate to it because they've been harmed by a belief system of God. So a lot of people gravitate towards Buddhism in our tradition because they are rebelling against Christianity. And so many Buddhists do not think we're real Buddhists. But that's neither here nor there. We've had Buddhism percolate into our popular culture. Brad Pitt in the 90s put out that movie, 7 Years in Tibet. And this was very vogue reading for a while there, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And that was all about finding happiness in life. And it's a very beautiful book. I haven't read all of it, but it sounds good to me. Lastly here, guys, Buddhists are a hope for the environment. Buddhists are very good for the environment. The number one contributing factor to climate change is not cars and it's not necessarily pollution. It's methane from cows. And it's methane from factory farms. And so Buddhists are by virtue of having a vegetarian diet, are good for the environment. But many Buddhists are very active environmentalists as well. We have a lot of Buddhists that go out in protest. That Walk for Peace was in part a walk for climate change, a walk for the recognition that we are treating our earth poorly, and that our earth is part of us, and that our earth is an important part of ourselves. Buddhism is about integration. We should see more commonalities than we should see differences. When we see differences, we are in our own minds and we are very individualized and we have a very individual, I'm Connor does this, Connor does that experience. My heart is closed, my mind is closed, and I operate however I want, with no regard for anybody else. When you start to open your heart and you start to nurture the compassion within you, you start to realize that you're not inextricable from the earth. The earth gives you all of your food. The earth gives you all of your water. We should be grateful to the earth, and we should be grateful for everybody working it and taking care of it. So environmental stewardship is an immense part of the Buddhist faith as well. I think that's all, guys. Any questions? Any questions? Awesome.
When you say that the fifth largest religious group are agnostics,
That's the fourth pillar, yeah.
are you rolling atheists into that group?
I had that question as I was saying it. I don't think I am. I think I'm just talking about agnostics, which because the study I was reading is that there's some faith-basedness, and so it's mostly agnostic folks who believe in something but don't know what it is, and they don't necessarily ascribe to Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. Yeah, I think the atheists are off that list because they're not faith-based. Because they're not faith-based at all. So asking the question of they're not faith-based.
Faith-based.
What?
Faith-based. No.
Yeah, they don't have a belief in anything. And so that's
not an atheist. I'm an atheist. I object to that.
I
believe in being kind and never being afraid. My two commandments.
I'm saying metaphysical.
What?
But faith-based is something more metaphysical to me. I certainly believe you can have faith in virtue. But, that's something you have control over, right? I have control over if I'm kind in many ways. And this is an atheist belief, but I don't need a belief system in order to be kind to others. But I need faith to confront something like death sometimes.
I think you do need a belief system to be kind to others. I disagree with that statement as well.
Okay. I'm fine to disagree.
If everybody agreed with you, life would be dull.
This is certainly the debate, right? And this is a point that Buddha came to, right? Buddha's fundamental break with Hinduism was over these rituals and this endless devotion towards God or towards the gods in that case. And all these rituals, you do all these fire ceremonies and you're praying all the time and you're saying all these mantras and you're just worshiping these gods. And he said, why are you worshiping these gods? You are the thing. Stop worshiping the gods. The gods don't care about you like you care about you. The gods don't care. His big belief was that the gods are real, right? He met some of them in his visions and in his meditations. But he said they don't care about you like you think they do. They have their own lives. They're living out their own karma. Come to the realization that you alone can go on this journey. So even when the followers asked him, they would ask him about what happens after your death, what happens with these gods, and what are they doing over here? He knew the answers to all those questions, but he never gave them. Because he always routed them back to the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. He said, focus on yourself. Don't worry about that stuff. That stuff won't help you. This is what will help you. Meditate. Focus on your intentions. Focus on your livelihood, right? Be virtuous to others. This is a big fundamental belief in Buddhism. Buddhism is, in many ways, the translation of a lot of atheism into a faith.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting.
And it's really so close to us now. I mean, just in so many different ways.
What's so close to us? Buddhism?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it's becoming a bigger and bigger part.
It's just
Certainly right here. Yeah. I mean, like I said, the Zen Center of DU is a couple blocks away. Go to the Zen Center and sit in the Zendo. It's very nice. I mean, Buddhism is around us. We have big Buddhist center in downtown. There's a couple of them. Actually, we have Zen centers, we have Tibetan centers, we have, there's a Theravada school up off of 26th and Josephine. That's very cool. Buddhism is all around us, and especially here in Colorado, especially in the Denver metro area. Trungten Rinpoche founded Naropa up in Boulder, and he is very well renowned in the Buddhist communities. Very strange guy, if you guys know anything about him. He would sleep with all of his students, and they all drank and they all partied, and he told everybody to do a bunch of drugs and practice, just be free with your love and free with your practice. It was another way to get people to enlightenment. He said, go exhaust all those avenues, right? If you want pleasure, pursue pleasure. Realize that pleasure will not give you the lasting happiness that you seek. Go experiment with it. Go prove it to yourself that that's what's going to happen. So Buddhists are very different, and they all have different ways of practicing those things. Not all Buddhists are vegetarians. Tibetans eat primarily meat, because that's all they have. Tibet is like this isolated place. Tibet doesn't have roads very much. They are very, very isolated, and they eat ox for the most part. I mean, there's no hard and fast rules in Buddhism. And all the schools are different, but all of them are geared towards getting you from this point to enlightenment. And how do we get there? And you realize that you don't have to move at all, right? You are already enlightened. All you have to do is realize it. All right, thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time.
What's next time?
I think it's Cuba, but don't hold me to it.
It's what?
Cuba.
Cuba?
Cuba.
Which will be very in the news by the time we're talking about it, I think. Yeah, it's already starting to enter the conversation. It's a pleasure to be with you guys. Thank you.